Good morning, everyone. I especially want to greet those who are meeting us online, who are following us. Sadly, we couldn't go online on YouTube, but we're live on Facebook. So you can follow us on Facebook. Hopefully, maybe in the meantime, this will be done so that we can also be on YouTube. But if not, hopefully this will be uploaded then later after the fact that people can watch us. As some of you people see, I've had some accident here. I have this cast that I have to wear for another 3 weeks, so I'll be preaching while sitting. And that is completely biblical, believe me, because Jesus would teach while sitting. So this is completely biblical today. But even if it wasn't, our position doesn't really matter as long as our hearts are attuned and we are ready to listen to what our God has to tell us this morning. Let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that we can follow your word, that we can study, that we can worship you, even when we can't get together in our churches, but we can still watch online and have some unity. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that we can now open your word, help us to understand, and help us to be willing to learn. Thank you, Heavenly Father. In your name we pray. Amen. A story says that in the late 1800s, a member of British Parliament went to Scotland to make a speech. He got off the train in Edinburgh, and then he took the carriage south to a small town. Unfortunately, the carriage got stuck in the mud, and he couldn't move. But the local farm boy came to help him out and pull him out with his team of horses. The politician offered him a reward for that, but the young boy said he didn't need anything. And then the politician pressed him a little bit, and then he said, "Well, is there anything I can do for you, young boy? What would you like to be when you grow up?" And the boy said, "I would like to be a physician, to be a doctor." And the politician promised that he will do whatever he can. And in fact, he secured the admission for the young guy to the university. During the Second World War, some 50 years after this occasion, Winston Churchill lay deathly ill from pneumonia in Morocco. A new wonder drug that was available helped him a lot, and this drug was penicillin, who was invented or discovered by Sir Alexander Fleming, who was actually this young boy, the young Scottish boy from some 50 years ago. And who was the politician who sponsored him to the university? His name was Lord Randolph Churchill, the father of Winston. Is there a coincidence there? Well, you might look at the world around you, and it might seem that there are many coincidences. But with God, there's not many coincidences. And I'm sure that this was planned by God in some way. When you look at the world and the experience of a young person by the name of Joseph from the Bible, his story, seen by just human eyes, seems to look like coincidence. You know, he was despised by his brothers. He was sold as a slave to Egypt. But in the end, he became their savior. We see that God led him through his life. And this is what we want to study today. We want to touch on the life of a young Joseph and what we can learn today. I'm going to share with you three different lessons that we can learn from Joseph. I know there's many more we can learn from his life, but I'm going to limit myself to these 3 lessons that we can learn from the life of Joseph. But first, let's start to think about life of Joseph. You see, Joseph was born as the 11th of 12 children. And since he was born in the late age of his father, he was beloved. And his father gave him this beautiful robe of many colors. And so he paraded before his brothers, and he was obviously proud of that as well. And of course, that robe of many colors, as many theologians are even telling us, mentioned or meant that Joseph was the one who was the most important of all of his brothers, and that he was the one who is going to inherit everything. And that was something that his brothers, of course, hated. And they hated him with his beautiful robe. And so his father sent him off to see his brothers because they were tending sheep. The Bible says that when he went to see his brothers, they hated him from the distance. And they decided to do something with him. They decided to kill him. And they would have done so if it wasn't for one of their brothers who said, "No, we shouldn't kill him. He is our brother after all. Let him alive. Let him live." And so they just put him in this hole in the earth and then in the pit, and then they later sold him to the Ishmaelites, or Arabs, we would say today. And then young Joseph, at the age of maybe 15 to 17 years, was sold as a slave to Egypt. You know, at your young, tender age, when you need the most attention by your family, when you need to be paupered and loved by everyone, you are now sold as a slave. You're now owned as a thing. You're now owned as a piece of property. You're owned as a tool. But as we later read from the life of Joseph, you know, he rose to heights through much misery and toil. And this is, by the way, what there's a saying which says, "Through the mud to the stars." The life of Joseph is an amazing life story. In his young, tender age, he was sold as a slave to Egypt. And you might think to yourself, what would I do? Imagine yourself being sold as a slave. We are lucky that we live today in a Western world where there is not, or you could say not much slavery, because sadly around the world there is still some slavery. But imagine being yourself sold like that. What would you do? How would you react? Would you let yourself be buried deep in your psychological depths of suffering? What would you do? How would you react? Would you have lived the life that Joseph lived? Let's see those three different messages or three different lessons this morning that we can learn from the life of Joseph. Well, first lesson that I have learned for myself and that we can learn for us is that we always need to stay positive. You see, as I said, Joseph was very young, and it was time to enjoy his family. Imagine yourself when you were 15 years of age or 17 years of age. How did you think? What did you do? It was the best time of your life, carefree, you know. And so that was Joseph as well, with his beautiful robe, enjoyed, you know, being paupered, being you know, the center of attention of his family. But then this best time of his life was suddenly turned into the worst time of his life. And try to imagine for yourself. I mean, today we are very mobile civilization. We move around the world, and there's even young folks that move around the world to study, you know, in different college somewhere on the other side of the world. But that was not the world of Joseph. You know, history tells us that most of the people would barely move 10 to 20 miles away from their village, and that was their movement. Being sold to Egypt hundreds of miles away was like being sold to a different planet at that time. And so Joseph, once he was, you know, the beloved part of his family, he was once loved by everyone, well, except his brothers, but all the rest of them loved Joseph. Now he is suddenly a slave. He's made slave, you know, without any rights. You're treated like a thing, not a person. Can you imagine the worst case scenario? At the best years of his life, you suddenly experience a twist like that. So how was young Joseph to react? What was he to do? What would he do now? Give up? What would you do? Probably be depressed or lose your sense, lose your bearing. You know, while preparing myself for this, I kind of remembered how I reacted a few days ago when they told me that I will have to wear this cast for another month, and being a guy who loves going out and walking and running, I was like, a month? And for a few minutes I was like, downcast. What am I going to do? I'm going to be useless for another month. And then, of course, the message came back to me. No, that's not how you are to react. No whining. It's up to us to make a decision. How are we going to think for ourselves? Well, how did Joseph react? Let's go back to Genesis chapter 39 and read from the beginning of chapter 39. What did Joseph do? How did he behave after this? Genesis 39, I'm reading verses 1 to 6. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of the Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From this time, he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned. The Lord blessed the household of Egyptian because of Moses. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar did, because in the house, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Joseph is a dependable young boy. This text tells us a lot. It tells us that, first of all, he worked in the house of his master. Of course, there were different types of slaves, and probably the majority of them worked outside in the field somewhere in the heat of the day, in the heat of the sun. But Joseph, he had luck to work inside of the house. And here and there, the text tells us that the Lord was with Joseph. Well, why would Lord be with Joseph? I guess because Joseph was with the Lord. He made his mind that even where he's there, that he's going to be dependable. He could have said to himself, well, I first of all hate this guy. He's an Egyptian, and he treats me like a slave. He bought me like a slave. I don't care about him. And I'm going to do nothing. I'm just going to, make a scene here, make a something, throw a tantrum, and I'm not going to work, But Joseph was dependable, so much so that the Bible text says here that this guy, Potiphar, left everything in the hands of Joseph. Why would he do that? Well, because Joseph was a very dependable young man. He was responsible. He did everything he was supposed to do, and more, because the Bible says that everything that Potiphar did with Joseph in charge prospered, because Joseph made up his mind to be of service, to be there, to be dependable in every circumstance. Now, we know that a little bit after that, Joseph was thrown into the prison. And we're going to study a little bit more about that a little bit later. Now, what happened in prison? What usually happens in prison? There's not much prospering in the prison, right? But here's what it says about Joseph. Again, chapter 39 of Genesis, verses 20 to 23. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, you guessed, the Lord was with him. And he showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph, and he gave him success in whatever he did. What a wonderful story. For many of the young people, especially if you're young watching this, you might think to yourself, I want to be successful as Joseph was. Well, there is a little secret to that, and it's called the Lord was with Joseph. Why would the Lord be with Joseph? Because Joseph chose in his mind to be dependable, to be with the Lord, and that's why God blessed him as well. You know, even in prison, even in the worst circumstances, you can thrive. Most of the people around us, they are very reactive to the circumstances. So when something happens, you're like, oh, this is what happens, and I can't be happy. I can't prosper because of, the circumstances. I can't prosper because of my family. I can't prosper because of my boss, and you name it. But Joseph could have had many opportunities to say, well, I can't prosper. I'm a loser in life because, look, I'm slave, and not just a slave. I'm a prisoner now. But everything that Joseph touched flourished, even in prison, because Joseph was with God. So he changed the worst situation where he was to his benefit. Stephen Covey, the famous author of the now famous book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about his first habit, which is be proactive. I wanted to include a quote which is very, very interesting and very important. It says, our behavior is a function of our decisions, not our conditions. We can subordinate feelings to values. Look at the word responsibility. Responsibility, the ability to choose your response. Highly proactive people recognize that responsibility. They do not blame circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for their behavior. Their behavior is a product of their own conscious choice based on values rather than the product of their conditions based on feeling. And I love this very much. Joseph obviously made a choice to be or to do the best in any given circumstance, wherever he is. And God blessed him because of that. Lesson number 2 that I want to share with you today is you can resist the temptation. You see, we live in a very pleasurable society. We live in a society where people zero in on feelings and pleasures. Enjoy yourself in any possible way. Food, whatever you do, drugs, sexual promiscuity. Just give yourself, and to your feelings, enjoy. We live today at a time where sexual impurity is thought to be totally normal. Why wait before marriage? If it's consensual, do whatever you want. As long as it's consensual, that's the only thing that they look at. Do whatever you want. Don't restrain your body, they say. Just enjoy yourself. Abstinence is strange. Abstinence, what? You're abstaining? From what? Eating, drinking, whatever? No, you shouldn't. Just give yourself some freedom and enjoy yourself. But the story of Joseph tells us something different. Let's go back again to Genesis 39, and this time I'm reading verses 6 to 10, or rather the last part of the verse 6. We already read that verse where Potiphar left everything in charge of Joseph, and then the last part is kind of segue into the next story. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" This is very important. We're going to come to that later. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. This is an interesting story, especially for younger people. How Joseph is a man of principle. We probably can imagine Potiphar's wife to be fairly young, maybe even of Joseph's age, or maybe a little bit older, but still very young and beautiful. And she was there at him every day. Every day she obviously fell in love with young and handsome Joseph, and she wanted something more. And of course, as all the people at that age, sexuality had free reign, she thought she can use Joseph for some, sexual play because he was slave. But he wouldn't let her do it. The Bible says that he even didn't want to be with her. So whenever he saw her, he not only kind of, chatted with her or, spent some time enjoying her presence, he would flee from her because he knew she's after me and she knows what she wants. And so he was fleeing. He was principle driven, not feeling driven. Because, he says to her, how could I do this awful thing and sin against my God? See, that's what he thinks. He thinks about his God. He thinks about his responsibilities. He is responsible to Potiphar, but he is responsible to God as well. As a good servant, he says, I can't do that because you are his wife. And probably young Potiphar's wife thinks to herself, what in the world? Because, she just wanted to live easy. But no, he says, I can't do that. We sometimes imagine Joseph to be someone without any feelings, but no, that wasn't true, right? He was a young fellow. He was a healthy, strong guy. Everything was normal with him, including his normal sexual feelings. And she was a beautiful woman, for sure. Chemistry is always there. It wasn't that he didn't feel anything, but he said no, because that was a principle. He went against his feelings. He went against what devil would want him to do, but he said, no, I can't do this. Great sin and sin against God. And so one day when he was thrown in prison, I can imagine him talking to other prison inmates. And they would ask him, why did you come here? What did you do? And then he would say, well, I refused to have sex with my mistress. And they would have probably laughed him out, like, you are mad, you're crazy. That's the reason you came here? Well, and he would probably calmly say, yes, because I didn't want to sin against my God. And so today we'll live at this era, as I said, when these feelings of pleasure are everywhere. Look around yourself. Even some products are presented to you by using that insinuating way of presenting. And so it's like normal thing. And people say, no, you can't resist. You shouldn't resist. You just give yourself in and enjoy. But Joseph says, no, you can resist. Why? Because he is with God and God is with him. And he is responsible, able to choose his own response. And where many people failed, even in the Bible, Joseph resisted. And he is the model of sexual purity for the modern generation. When you are with God, you hold on to principles. And waves can crush onto you, as they did onto Joseph. But Joseph said, no, I'm not going to do it. Again, he was not without feelings. He was a young fellow. But he said, no, it's principle that I have to obey rather than everything else. So, lesson number 2, you can resist the temptation. You can be principle driven. When people give you insinuating thoughts or suggestions, you can say, no, this is my decision. But you know what? You have to make that decision before then. If those are the moments you are kind of thinking to yourself, do I do it or don't I do it? You will fall because you need to make that decision beforehand. When we read about young Daniel in Babylon, he made the decision to be pure before he was ever in any trouble. So, as I have another sermon that I will maybe preach here, and the title of that sermon is that you need to dig the well before you're thirsty, right? Not while you're thirsty. So be ready before trouble comes. You can resist the temptation. And lesson number 3 is don't be the slave of your past. Now, what do I mean by that? When you look at people in Joseph's life, most of them were were slaves of their own past. Let's read a few verses. We're going this time to Genesis chapter 42 and reading verse 21. So this is about Joseph's brothers. They said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life," back when they were selling him. "But we wouldn't listen. That's why this distress has come on us." When they're in Egypt, when they're trying to buy food for themselves and they're going through all of these struggles, they're saying, "Oh, that's because of our brother in the past." Well, you might say it's good. Their conscience is working. It is, but still they're slaves of their past. They're carrying their past with them. That's because what we did to our brother a number of years ago. And now look at Joseph's father as well, Jacob, right? Again, chapter 42, verse 36, a little bit later on in the chapter, verse 36. Their father Jacob said to them, to his sons, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more." Remember, Simeon stayed in Egypt as a guarantee that they will come back. "And now you want to take Benjamin? Everything is against me." You see, this phrase, "everything is against me," is again the phrase the people usually use who are very reactive. Right? Everything is against me. All the circumstances, people, everything is against me. I can't do anything. That's wrong. You can. But anyways, that's what he thinks. Everything is against me. Okay, let's see. So his father, his brothers, they felt conditioned. They felt guilty. They could not get rid from their past. Maybe I can read another verse. Genesis 42, verse 13. But they replied, "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man, who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." So they're talking to Joseph, or to his representative there in Egypt, as they're buying the grain. And again, they just keep thinking about what happened in the past. Of course, Joseph, you remember that when they came to Egypt for the first time ever, he recognized his brothers, and he wanted to test them. He wanted to see if they have changed, right? Or if they are the same old guys that they were before. So Joseph, recognizes his brothers, and he sees they were changed. They are now different people. And then he opens himself before his brothers. He cries, opens himself, and his brothers tremble before him out of fear. And now this is when the moment, that we were talking about, how they're slaves of their past, comes really clearly. Not that they're saying, "Oh, finally, here's our brother. Yeah, we're cleared, right, from our past." But still, they are fearful that now is the chance. He's going to misuse his authority. He's going to come against them. He's going to, do what he wants to do. But, Joseph says, no. Let's go to Genesis 45. Let's start with chapter or verse 3. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Of course, because of their past. And then verses 7 and 8. Joseph says, "Do not worry, I'm not going to kill you, because God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father of Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt." He sees patterns where they don't see anything. He sees, don't worry, guys. Maybe it seems like you are responsible for that. Well, you did it, but it was God's plan all along. There's no coincidences with God. And so God knew what was going to happen. And you see that Joseph has broken from his past, right? He is free. He acts proactively. Because if he was the slave, if he had been the slave of his past as his brothers, he would have said, "Yeah, I know, but I still hate you. You were still miserable guys. I'm going to crush you now. I'm going to teach you a lesson," right? But Joseph says, no, forget about that. That was God's will. he acts proactively. He acts the best in the given situation. And, after Jacob dies, Jacob comes to Egypt, and there's, I think, 13 years or something that he lives there, and then he dies. But after his death, again, his brothers are afraid of Joseph. They're again slaves of their past. Let's read in Genesis chapter 50, starting in verse 15. So when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died." You see how they kind of try to negotiate with Joseph, right? This is what you're going to say to Joseph. "I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of God, of the God of your father." When their message came to Joseph, Joseph wept. He's like, are you going to learn ever? They're still afraid for themselves, and they even use the authority of their dead father to kind of appease Joseph, right? His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. What a proactively acting person, right? He says, don't worry. I know why God did this. I have forgiven you all. And they just couldn't let go of their past, And Joseph shows us that we can be free from our past. It is oftentimes that past influences how we behave in the present. We are what we are because of our, family circumstances. We can't deny that. But it's not bound to be. Because we can break free. We can say, yes, that's what happened, but now I make a different choice. Now I'm going to do something else. We blame our past for our present. Everything is against me, I grew up like that, and that's just it, right? So we live in our past mistakes, or, the past hatreds or whatever we have in the past are all present all the way in our present today. I've seen people living out their hatred and their, wrong relationships with other people. Oh, that was 20, 30, 50 years ago, and they still hold a grudge. Jesus says, forgive. Let the past be past. Live your new life. Our sins, they don't need to affect our present thinking. Why? Because Jesus forgives us, and he cleanses us. Well, there are sometimes, things that we need to carry from that past, but we don't have to carry guilt, and that's something. We can turn a new page. We can live a new life. To be free is our own choice. And of course, God tells us, you can be free. Just accept this freedom. No need to be slave of your past. No need to be slave of your own circumstances. Think about Joseph. Daniel as well, he could say, made the similar experience, right? Being taken to Babylon. But he made a choice. And that's explicitly what let's say, Daniel says, that he made a choice to be free, to live as free as he can. So Joseph, although he was in the prison, remember that he was in the prison, but still he was inwardly a free man, and nobody could take his freedom away from him. One day, the Harry Houdini, the famed escape artist, issued a challenge, and of course he would issue a challenge wherever he went. And he said that he could be locked in any jail cell in the country, and that he could, break free out of there. And he always kept his promise, but, one time something went totally wrong. Houdini entered the jail cell and the doors slammed behind him. He took a hidden, like a little metal thing that he used to open the doors, and he started on his way to open the doors. But something was different with this lock. He couldn't understand why. Every time he would set himself free in just a few minutes, but it just wouldn't work now. And so he didn't know what it is. And for 30 minutes he worked and he got nowhere. And then an hour passed, and again he just couldn't break free. And And he was so bathed in sweat, and he was so tired, and he was so angry at himself that after 2 hours, he finally, in anger, he fell against that door that just wouldn't open. And the door just swung open by itself. Guess what? The doors were not even locked. But in his mind, he thought they were. And so he fought for 2 hours. You see, Joseph was free. He didn't think like a slave. There's something called slave psychology, but Joseph did not have that slave psychology. He was a free man. He showed us a great lesson, how to live the best in your circumstances, how to make the best of where you are. We're not victims of our circumstances. We can choose to be faithful to God, and God is going to be faithful to us, and He's going to bless us wherever we are. So we can choose our reaction, and we can choose our attitude, and that makes the difference. So wherever you are, don't say, it's circumstances in question. Oh, this or that. No, you choose how you're going to behave. And God is always there to help you. God is always there to give you the way. And I'm going to finish with a quotation from White's book, Patriarchs and Prophets, where she says, there are few who realize their influence, or who realize the influence of the little things of life upon the development of character. Nothing with which we have to do is really small. The varied circumstances that we meet day by day are designed to test our faithfulness and to qualify us for greater trusts. By adherence to principle in the transactions of ordinary life, the mind becomes accustomed to hold the claims of duty above those of pleasure and inclination. Minds thus disciplined are not wavering between right and wrong like the reed trembling in the wind. They are loyal to duty because they have trained themselves to habits of fidelity and truth. By faithfulness in that which is least, they acquire strength to be faithful in greater matters. There are many other things that we can learn from young Joseph, but here are 3 things that I guess help us to be the better person that we were. Let's finish with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you have left this wonderful experience of Joseph in the Bible. Oh yeah, we oftentimes admire him. We look at him and say, wow, he could do such a great thing. But truth is, we all can do that. And you have left that for us so that we can learn, that we can be inspired, and that we can do the same thing. Because you are making that possible for us. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that we can choose our own reaction. Thank you that even in the midst of the worst circumstances of life, we can still be faithful to you, and that you can bless us everywhere. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Be with us as we go through our life, and help us to stay with you. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us in this first part. We'll take a few minutes of break and get ready for our second part, which will feature our Sabbath School panel here. See you in a few minutes.
Every afternoon in St. Martin, a town in Trinidad and Tobago, Magdalena would stand outside a pharmacy, waiting for her dad to pick her up after school. Sometimes she had to wait more than an hour. She watched all the people coming and going from the pharmacy, and she wondered if those people loved Jesus. One afternoon, Magdalena had a question for her dad as she hopped into the car. "So many people come by the pharmacy," she said. "Can I share some mission tracts with them?" He was happy to hear that his daughter wanted to share Jesus with other people. "Yes, that's fine," he said. Her dad found some tracts about the love of Jesus, and Magdalena put them in her backpack when she went to school the next day. After school, she offered the tracts to people outside the pharmacy. "Hello, how are you?" she said. "Can I share with you this tract about the love of Jesus?" Everyone accepted the tract. Nobody could refuse one from her. When her dad came to pick her up, she happily announced that she had given away all the tracts. Magdalena took more tracts the next day and the next. When they ran low on tracts, her dad made copies on the printer at home. After a while, Magdalena noticed that a dentist passed by the pharmacy every afternoon on his way to the office. Every afternoon, she gave him a tract, and every time he took one. Magdalena told her dad about the dentist. "Daddy, can I talk to him about Jesus?" she asked. Her dad knew the dentist. "Sure, no problem," he said. The next day, Magdalena was waiting for the dentist when he walked by. "Do you have Jesus in your life?" she asked. The dentist was surprised by the question. He hadn't read the tracts the girl had given him. "I've heard about Jesus, but I don't believe in him," the dentist said. Magdalena was sad to hear that. "Do you have time to hear a Bible story?" she said. The man once again couldn't refuse the offer and invited her to come to his office the next day. Her dad gave permission for Magdalena to go to the dentist's office. That night, Magdalena asked her dad for some Bible verses about Jesus to share. She also had one more request. "The dentist doesn't have a Bible," she said. "Can I give him one?" Her dad found a brand new Bible. The dentist said, "Thank you," when Magdalena gave him the Bible the next afternoon. For the next month, Magdalena went to the dentist's office every day after school. She and the dentist read the Bible together and talked about the stories. Slowly, the dentist began to believe in Jesus. So Magdalena invited her new friend to go to church with her the next Sabbath. "Yes, I have time," he said. "I can go." Magdalena excitedly broke the news to her dad when he picked her up. "I invited the dentist to go to church with me, and he said yes," she said. On Sabbath, Magdalena and her mom and dad picked up the dentist on their way to church. "Your daughter is wonderful," the dentist told her parents. "Before, I didn't know anything about Jesus, but now I know him." Magdalena became a real missionary when she shared tracts with the dentist and told him about Jesus. She wants to live the rest of her life sharing Jesus with others.
Hello, welcome back to our study time. We're blessed today to have Rob back with us and Shirley's with us, and I'm happy to be back too. So we're going to get into our study group here. We'll just start with a word of prayer and ask the Holy Spirit to be with us. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your Sabbath, for time to take time off from the world and from the work of everything, and to look to you and to study your word. And we just ask that your Holy Spirit come on this group today as we discuss this subject of the covenant and the law, and just pray that you open our eyes to your truth. I ask in your name, amen.
Amen.
All right, so this week we are looking at the subject of the relationship between the covenant and the law. We've been talking about this covenant all along here, but looking at how the law relates to that promise. and it can be a tricky subject for some people. So we're going to look at this memory text here. Shirley, do you want to read the memory text for us?
Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is a faithful God, keeping his covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love him and keep his commandments. Deuteronomy 7:9.
So the love to thousands of generations of those who keep his commandments. So this is where it can get kind of tricky, because it almost kind of sounds like he's saying, if you do what I tell you, then I'll love you. Like his love comes with a condition almost. And I know I've had some discussions with some people from other denominations who do get tripped up on this. So that's why I say it's an important subject. So we're going to look at this week. It gives us a little outline here what we're going to kind of look at. So we're going to kind of shoot to answer some of these questions. It says, what did Israel's election mean? So we know that Israel was a chosen people. So what does it mean to be a chosen people? How does Israel's election maybe parallel our own in Christianity today, or even in Adventism, right? Does that covenant come unconditionally? And why is obedience such an integral part of the covenant relationship? And that's the big one. I think that's the big one. So let's look a little bit at this election of Israel just to understand what was going on there. The lesson brought up an interesting point, and I didn't know this, but it says Jewish tradition has taught that God made the covenant with Israel only because other nations rejected it first. That's the first time I heard that.
Me too, yeah.
So apparently that's some Jewish tradition. So, but there's no biblical basis or evidence for that position. But it does raise the question of why Israel was chosen. So we need to be careful to look at this idea of election, because it's fraught with this potential theological misunderstanding. What did God choose Israel for? Was it just to redeem Israel and everybody else is just automatically lost? Or were they chosen to be vehicles who could offer the world what they had been offered? Mm-hmm. So we're going to look at some text here to kind of help clarify that a little bit. So maybe we'll start with Pastor Bob there with Exodus 19:6.
Yeah, sure.
And Rob, if you want to look up Isaiah 56:7.
All right.
And Shirley, if you want to do Hebrews 2:9.
Okay, Exodus 19, verse 6. Yeah. You will be for me a kingdom of priests and the holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites.
Even them I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon mine altar, for mine house shall be called a house of prayer for all people.
I just, before I read my verse, I'd like to make some comment. Are you going to comment on these? Because
yeah.
I think there's some very important issues here.
Absolutely.
Like, what is the role of a priest? Mm-hmm. A priest is probably a mediator. He's the one that would collect the blood from the sacrifices and take it into the holy place and pray over the people. Mm-hmm. But I find it very interesting here that it's saying here that this would be a kingdom of priests. So what does that really mean? What is a kingdom of priests? The priest was there officiating over the Jewish people as they came and confessed their sins. But when you have a kingdom of priests, I just found this out last night as I was listening to somebody else, and it was very, very intriguing to me to say that a kingdom means it's for the whole world. It's not only for just a few, just for them, but for everybody. And this is what you read there, Rob, that my house will be a house of prayer for all people on all nations. And I think this goes back to the Abrahamic covenant when he says it's for everybody. Yeah. Everybody's included.
The world will be blessed by
That's
his
right.
For me, when I was reading this, you will be the kingdom of priests, meaning we know what priests priests did, right? And there's only a small people out of the whole nation that were supposed to be priests. But now God says, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to take whatever the priest does and confer on you as the whole nation. So all of you, every Jew, right, are going to be a priest to the rest of the world. So that's how I saw this, that you will be like the whole nation of priests, all of them, right? And so I'm kind of elevating you. You are the priest for the whole world.
Right.
But then again, it's not that God says, if you're not the priest, you will not be saved. But priest is there just to mediate and to...
And so that's I saw that too, and I thought that was really interesting because within Israel, they had their own priests, only from the tribe of Levi, within them. But he's really saying that the whole nation of Israel is to act as priests to the rest of the world. And that's why I thought it was interesting when he said, "My house will be a house of worship for all." Well, the translation I got says all nations. So not just a house of worship for Israel.
That's right.
And then Hebrews
2:9 says the same, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, might taste death for everyone.
Everyone.
That's a thought that...
Yeah, so I think the Bible's clear that this election of Israel wasn't just for the salvation of Israel.
No.
It was to be
It had nothing with salvation to do, but it had a special mission.
It had a mission.
preach,
There was a priestly mission,
That's right.
Priests are also teachers, so they were to reveal to the rest of the world, to the rest of the people, who God really is, right?
Yeah, I love that, That's
So
important.
it says a little further in the lesson here, it clarifies, it says that Israel's election was not to turn the Hebrew nation into some exclusive club,
No.
hoarding the promise of salvation and redemption.
No.
The redemption was to be made known, and really our church has been called to do the same thing. So we can look at this election of Israel. So like we asked the question earlier at the beginning here, how does that apply to how does their election apply to us as a church today? A similar thing where as Christians, the New Testament says we are all a royal priesthood, right? So as Christians, we have that same role. We have that same election to be an example to the world, to draw people to Christ.
So we are to be a mission. Their purpose was for mission, right? It's interesting though, like when they were wandering through the wilderness and interacting with all the different tribes, God kind of expected the people to see how they were living because they were kind of surrounded by this law and they were blessed and they had a harmony, or they should have had a harmony. So people would come to them and say, "Wow, what an amazing God you have." So, and then when Jesus gave us the commission, we don't expect people to come to us. We have to go to them. It's just a different way of interacting, but we are still to teach the people, and because we have something to say.
And we have a comment from one of our viewers.
Yes, we have a comment from Pastor Doug Hahn, and he says, "It is interesting that Deuteronomy refers to the covenant as a covenant of love as opposed to law."
That's right.
Refers to a covenant of love as opposed to a covenant of law.
And I remember last time, it was 2 weeks ago when I facilitated as well, and that was the question, almost the first question that we went into. Why did God choose Israel? And then, the way I understood it is not because they were something special, but because they were the most needy of all, right? God says, you are the smallest, and once you understand that it's not, I'm something, but it's just about God's, grace, it's about God's love. It's not about me. Then you're really humbled and ready to serve, right?
And he carried them on eagle's wings. We had that because that was a very, very precious way of interacting with them, and he wanted them to. He was with them. So when you read that Deuteronomy, the memory verse, it was love. He had so much love for them, and you can't separate law and love, really. To me, it's very interwoven.
And I think it's important to clarify too. I thought it was a little bit confusing in the lesson when they were asking about why Israel was chosen, because they seemed to gloss over. To me, it seemed like Israel's choosing was actually fulfillment of the promise made to Abraham. Really, because so even though Israel was weak and poor and unfit and undeserving, they were the descendants of Abraham, and God had promised Abraham that He would make him a great nation and all this. So the selection of Israel was really just a fulfillment of that Abrahamic promise in the beginning anyway, right? And God loved Abraham, and Abraham had that relationship with God where that promise could be fulfilled.
Once again, the thought that we're studying, right? God says to Abraham, through you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So again, this global, right, influence and meaning. Yeah.
So let's move on to Monday's lesson here, because I want to try to get through all this today. Monday's lesson here talks about the tie that binds, and so we're looking here at this connection, between the covenant and the law. And so this concept that they're inseparable, so you can't have a relationship. A covenant is a relationship. I think we've been talking about that for a while. A covenant is an agreement. It's a relationship. There's involved in that, and this idea that relationships need to have boundaries. Relationships need to have rules. They need to have some boundaries. And so this idea is you can't have a relationship and get rid of the law, as maybe many Christians believe. So I just want to go around the group and just get some input on that. And
I keep thinking that the law that we're naming is actually the laws of love. They're principles of how we are to love one another and to love God. And that if we break those rules, then we are hurting the relationships that we have amongst ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, the comment I put for myself here is like, boundaries or rules are the safeguard of any relationship, right? I mean, you can't have relationship and then say, imagine like, marrying a woman. Let's say I marry a woman and then I say, oh, I can still do whatever I want, after I married you. And then she's like, why the hell did you marry me then? I mean, what's the meaning of marriage in that context, right? So there has to be something, well, I love you and therefore I'm going to, let's say, ignore every other woman because I love you. Right? And that's the boundary you set. And without that boundary, there's really no commitment, no love.
Right.
That's right. So. And even in families, I mean, we all have to have rules. Anywhere we go, like, you have a schoolroom, you have anything, you have to have certain rules. People have to know how to act and what is expected of them. And it's not it's because you love them. That's basically why you're doing it. If you didn't love people, then you wouldn't care. Like you said, run around whoever you want. But I love you. And when I'm doing this for your good, it's for you, for your pleasure. And
I think it's important here to look too, because we're talking about God's law given to Israel, and there was a lot of laws involved in that.
Yes.
But a lot of these laws, as you brought out in your sermon, actually existed before Mount Sinai. The Ten Commandments actually existed before Mount Sinai, and so this is bigger than just Israel and what was given at Mount Sinai too. And we think about these laws, just to give our viewers maybe a time frame. Joseph, his life took place before Egypt.
Oh yeah.
So we're talking 500 years before Sinai, almost 400 and some years, right?
Yeah, well, at least 200 to 300 years, maybe even more. So yeah.
So we're talking a long time before Sinai, and Joseph knew in his heart that messing around with Potiphar's wife was adultery and a sin against God. He didn't say it was a sin against Potiphar. He said, "How can I do this wicked thing against Potiphar?" He didn't say that.
Right.
He said, "How can I do this wicked thing against God?" Abraham had passed down and instructed through his family that these things were against God. And there's many examples before Sinai in the book of Genesis where many of the Ten Commandments were understood. Idol worship. Cain was guilty of murdering his brother because there was a law that said, "Thou shalt not murder."
Yeah.
And so we know these laws existed before, but that just gives us proof that those laws are part of a relationship. The angels in heaven had a relationship with God And Satan sought to destroy that relationship, and it says 2/3 of the angels or 1/3 of the angels chose Satan.
Yeah. And I guess that partly answers your question that you asked in the beginning, like, how can God say, I'm going to love you if you keep my commandments? Like, it seems very, very selfish. But when you understand that as the law of love and commitment, then, well, again, even if we don't follow God's commandments, Bible says that God still loves us, but he can't have this like formal covenant relationship if you don't follow the rules, right? So God says, yeah, I do love you, but see, I can't do anything for you because you're not faithful to me, right?
Right.
So,
In Matthew 22, he talks about this lawyer coming to ask Jesus, what is the greatest commandment in the law?
Yeah.
And like I think Rob said, he says, thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment.
Yeah.
And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And there we go. This is the 10 commandments. I mean, we cannot have love what if we didn't have the commandments? Then somebody can come and steal my car. I wouldn't have anything, we keep thinking of what happens to the other side, but it happens to us too. We have to, we're protected with the law.
It's kind of reminding me too of where God said, you have not because you will, or I'm not quoting it properly, but anyway, you don't have because you will consume it upon your own lusts.
yeah, that's from James, yeah.
So, for God to, in his covenant relationship with us, continue to give to us, but we're not obeying his laws of love, then we're just taking what he's giving us and consuming it
to our own peril.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
in lust and in to our own unhealth, right?
So let's discuss a little bit here about the law, or the Torah is the Hebrew word for the law.
Torah, yeah.
Right.
And in the Torah, there's more than just the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
There's a lot of things in there that I think are part of that relationship too. And there was a lot of health and diet instructions involved in that, cleanliness instructions that that God gave Israel, that are for our benefit, that are easily an interpretation of love as well. We have another comment from someone.
We have a comment from Pastor Doug. He says, it was Lucifer's rebellion in heaven that revealed the law. Apparently, the angels did not realize there was a law before the father of lies began his evil work.
Interesting.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that too.
Well,
I'm
that's
sure
what
if
it
our
means,
viewers can hear that, right? Maybe
That's what it means, that, he's going to write the law in our hearts. And that's the way we have to live. We don't know what law. Like even when he says, you did this to me, you did this to me. When did we do all these things?
Yeah.
Because it's just a natural way of living.
natural response.
And this is what it's going to be like in the new earth, just like it was in heaven.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we need to remember that the angels were not created mindless robots.
No.
They weren't created programmable to love. They always, any of those angels always at any point in time had the free will to not follow God. And the devil, Satan, acted on that.
Yeah.
And that's why he was able to convince the other angels. If they were mindless robots, he wouldn't have been able to do that.
I underlined here something interesting in the Tuesday section. I don't know if we're there yet, but it says the work of the law within the covenant was to provide guidelines to the new life of the human covenant partner.
Yeah.
And that's how I view the Bible. Finally, it's when you buy a new product, you always get like instructions, manual, and I think that's what the Bible is. It's manual. How do you live a human life properly, right?
That's right.
And how do you flourish in this world where sin abounds? Right?
That's right. Well, because people right now don't know what's right, what's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way. We have these morals. It's a moral law, the 10 Commandments. And when you take away from them, well, then there's no more truth. It's like whatever is good for you is okay, whatever is good for me is okay, but it's not. That's, if we would just stick to what God has written, then we know what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah. We have another comment.
What His will is for us.
Yeah.
So we have a comment from Ray Bachon, and he says, "If you love me, you shall guard my commandments." John 14:15.
If you love me, you shall keep my
and I think
commandments.
that verse really expresses that it's an expression of love.
It's an
It's an expression of love.
natural reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. So, get back on track here. I was going to make a point here that you already started to make the point for me, actually. Today in society a lot of this idea of training and raising somebody is that it's becoming taboo. You know, this idea that God gives all these rules and instructions and guidance for Israel so that they can have a positive way of life. He's given us His word so that we can have a positive way of life. But this idea that we should be raising our kids with this instruction is going away. It's fading away because a lot of people in society now today are leaving decisions up to their children. Oh, I don't want to program my kids with anything. I want to let my kid decide. I want to let my kid decide about this or that or what's right and what's wrong. And I just heard now that they're just to add to that, a lot of provinces are saying now that children as young as 12 years old can go and get the vaccine without parental consent, without their parents even knowing, and the schools aren't obligated to tell the parents. So it's just like, wow, like
the trouble is without parental consent.
the training, the ability for a parent to raise their child in a way
being taken away
is being taken away slowly over time. So,
and it's totally against the nature of the child to, give it freedom, because you have to. I mean, I was reading the books by Jordan Peterson, right? And he makes a point. He says, in order to make our dog acceptable to the people, the dog has to go through some training, basic training, And we kind of let our children, and we think, they're just going to catch it on their own.
Right.
No, they're not. I mean, children need to be trained much more than you train the dog.
Yeah.
So there's something out of, in this society where people are losing,
And that's
basic
why
things,
That's why it says in Proverbs, "Spare the rod and spoil the child," and discipline has gone out the door.
And by mentioning the rod, it doesn't mean you spank them right away.
Right.
It's the whole idea of discipline. And teaching them, right?
Yeah.
And make them accountable, make them responsible. If they do something, let the consequences fall, rather than just, protecting them all the time and just saying, "Oh no, it's okay, that's okay." No, it's not.
Yeah.
Well, children will learn then, if it's not being taught by their parents, they'll learn from whatever pack, to use the dog analogy, they'll learn from whatever pack they choose to be a part of.
Yes.
And that's what we see now today. Whoever you surround yourself with, that's where you get your standard
And
from
what are they
for
learning?
right and wrong.
They're learning all this horrible stuff that,
Garbage.
it's just, and the word of God is not read by most parents. And I think this is where it stems. Because if they don't have the word in the home, and where are they going to get this training for themselves even?
Yeah, children don't really understand cause and effect quite yet. I remember as a kid, my parents used to clean a school at night. And so we would go there and play in the gymnasium, and we had sort of like this, where there was a stage, and we could go and play with the equipment, and we had these big balls with handles on them, and you could sit on them and bounce. Well, I thought it would be a really good idea to go off the end of the stage, and boy, was I going to bounce. Well, no, I got hurt pretty badly, and so I could not reason at that point that what was going to go wrong. Instead, I did a face plant. And
We have another comment.
Yeah, this comment is from Yvonne. That's me. And I just wanted to point out the importance of the scripture, "Spare the rod and spoil the child," is not referring to spanking your child, but to direct the child with a rod, sort of like little Bo Peep would have used, with the hook on the end, and you direct the child gently. So just so people know that we're not saying beat your child.
Physically
Right.
beat your
Absolutely.
child.
Yeah. So it says here that we started talking about this already a little bit, the stability of God's law, having these guiding rules and this way of life that God has established for us it actually gives us stability, because we don't have that. I like Paul's message about being like infants and tossed around by every wind and wave of doctrine. You know, like you're a little boat out in the ocean getting just thrown all around. When you don't have a rudder or a sail, you just get tossed around all over the place and just go this way and you go that way. But when you have that rudder or that sail that is God's word, it can carry you through those storms. It can keep you on track.
And I like the notion here, at least one sentence here says that his will and his law are one. So is his word, right? God's word and God are the same, right? I mean, that should be for us as well. Our word should be what we are, right? And so, you know, oftentimes, at least when studying, that's a pitfall that we need to avoid. I'm seeing that we talk about God's law, and then we're talking about God himself, almost as if God's law was something separate from God himself. No, that's not true.
No.
In that case, you know, if even God needs to listen to the law, then the law is God, right? But it's one. The law and God are one, and his word, it's all one. So,
Yes.
And God cannot go against himself. So
That's right.
that's where you have it.
I'd like to read this little paragraph on Tuesdays, the last part here. I thought it was really good. The part played by the law within the living reality of the covenant relationship showed that Israel could not follow the ways of other nations. They could not live by natural law, human needs, desires, or even social, political, and economic necessities alone. They could continue as God's holy nation, priestly kingdom, and special treasure only through uncompromising obedience to the revealed will of the covenant-making God in all areas of life. And I thought that was excellent. You know, that's the only way. That's the only way that we can be obedient, is through God and his grace and his living within us. And there has to be uncompromising obedience. I thought that was like powerful.
Yeah. And then in all areas of life.
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's this complete image of, it's not just, you know, in your mind you do something and then you do something else in your life. No, it's one unit.
That's right.
It says again on Wednesday's lesson too. It says that the presence of this law, having these laws in Israel, it prevented Israel from substituting some other philosophy or way of life, right? Like, so the same thing again. It gave them that stability, so they're not tossed around, choosing everything.
And again, I think we have to stress, we're not saved by keeping the law, but because we love the lawgiver, we are willing to do whatever he asks us to do. Just like in a love relationship, in the marriage relationship, you would do anything for your partner because of their love. And so this has nothing to do with salvation. It has to do with honoring God. And I really found out that God is a reciprocal God. He gives us love, but he wants us to give him love too, and have respect for him, and just to be a blessing to him, like he is a blessing to us. He's just an amazing God. When he blesses us, he just keeps showering us with more and more. And the more time you spend with him, the more you want to spend time with him. It's just awesome. It's just worshipful.
This whole idea of stability of God's law, right? Once you have the law, you have order, right?
Yes.
I mean, the basic thing that we have to fight against is chaos. There's two ideas that are present, like in almost all religions and philosophies, and that's order and chaos, right? You want to prevent chaos at any, at all cost. And
Yes.
God's will, God's law gives you that stability, that order, that, and that's what God is all about. God is about order. Even in the New Testament, Paul says, God is the God of order. Well, that's because he creates order out of chaos. And even in our spiritual life, he wants to create this order out of chaos that we lived in, right?
And look at the world around us. We are so confused. Everybody is confused. We don't even know what's right and wrong. Fake news, truth news. We don't know.
Everything goes, eh?
It's just confusing because we have no order.
Yeah.
And there is no principles that we're living by, like you talk in your sermon. Principles. There's no principles.
Yeah.
It's...
Might do that.
That's
Who
right.
cares?
So I think it's important to recognize too that this uncompromising obedience, that of course is the ideal, but that doesn't mean that that's what would happen. And we know from reading God's word that Israel didn't.
No, they
fulfill
didn't.
an uncompromising obedience by any standard, and they were drawn away by other philosophies of life and ideologies. That happened quite often, but God's law always stayed there the same to draw them back. That standard always stayed there, no matter how they strayed. God's standard was always there to not only show how they deviated, but it acted as a light to always be able to draw them back too, and it still stands for us as well.
This is what God righteousness is. I mean, He's the only one that lived a pure, holy life. I mean, we know that Jesus is the only human that did that. You know, and so we need to have that robe of righteousness. That's the only way we can do anything, uncompromising obedience.
Yeah. And I think it's Tracy brought this up on her way to church this morning too. Jesus was made a little lower than the angels, that one passage said. And she was like, well, he was God. How can he be lower than the angels and be God? And it's like, well, but for that time he was on earth here, he was lower than the angels.
Right.
Psalm 8 says the humans are created a little lower than the angels. So
yeah,
he was like human.
He was made level
Yeah.
down to our level, and that's what we need to understand. We got to make it clear that Jesus did not have some special advantage when he was here to be able to be obedient and keep the law. He was subject to the ways of the world and temptation just like the rest of us. He was our example that it can be done.
And he tasted death. Now, if he was God, God cannot die. But as a human, he tasted death for us.
Right.
I thought that's huge.
Yeah.
You know, that he had to, that when he was on that cross and in the Gethsemane, it was his humanity that was suffering and just grieving because all the weight of the sins was on his shoulders. He had no sin, but he was carrying the sins.
So I want to get to Thursday's lesson here because this is kind of the whole, for me, this is kind of the whole point here, and I want to be able to discuss this. So we'll wrap up with this thought here on Thursday. Understanding the difference between obedience as a reward, or being rewarded for obedience, or being blessed for obedience. And understanding this difference. So we have some Bible passages here that, you know, we should try to read these, so let's do that. So let's just go around the circle again. Bob, if you want to do Genesis 18, 19,
I'll do
and so on and so on.
I'll do
Rob, you'll be Genesis 26.
Exodus 19:5.
Okay.
4 to 5. Are you going to do Exodus, really?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do Leviticus then.
Okay, I'm going to start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ready? Genesis 18:19, for I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he had promised him.
So just quickly there, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I jotted for myself here is Abraham was about to teach, his household, and then, because Abraham was faithful enough, God was enabled to do something for him. Exactly what we find here later, that obedience creates the environment where God can bless us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like that. I love that.
Right. What do you got for
26,
Genesis
4?
26, 4 and 5? Yeah.
And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed.
So can you see a difference between being rewarded for obedience and being blessed for obedience?
Or even blessed through obedience.
Blessed through obedience.
Yeah, because
that's another way of saying it. Yeah.
Because there is no greater pleasure, actually, than to have your efforts, see them be a blessing to others, and to see the joy in them from what you've, done for them. It's really quite an amazing reward when you see that. And so I think that they missed out on a great blessing by choosing to not fulfill what God had for them.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they did.
Oh, we have a comment real quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that topic as Pastor Bob was saying today about Joseph, and Joseph was very obedient, and yet it seemed like he was being punished in some way. And I think sometimes we feel that we're being obedient and we're not seeing the results. Maybe we're suffering, and but I think Joseph, he had the right attitude and he had patience to wait on the Lord, because God does answer our prayers and he does reward our obedience, and sometimes it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Like even Daniel praying for 3 weeks before his prayers were answered. So
Right.
they were both obedient, but God did not respond immediately. So
Yeah. Well, and I think I thought it was really cool that Joseph actually, he perceived and saw that instead of being sold as a slave and all this stuff, but he actually saw it as God's will, so that he could be the leader of Israel and leader of Egypt and bless his family. So he actually saw the positive side of all that trial that he went through in his life. So he saw it as a blessing instead of a trial. And what does Exodus say there?
Well, we read this before.
Oh, we read this one already?
Yeah, it says, now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. So here he says, if you obey.
Yeah.
That little word, if, I guess that's the name of our page here, but if, and then you shall be a special treasure, for all the earth is mine. I just, again, it keeps repeating over and over. And yet the Israelites missed it. They thought it was all exclusive, that God was only for them, that they would not go out. And when Jesus was there, they did not, they shunned all the outcasts and shunned all those people. Oh no, they're not good enough.
So Leviticus 26:3 says similar to it. Starts with if. It says, if you walk in my statutes and my commandments and perform them, then I will give you rain in its season. The land shall yield its produce, and the trees in the field shall yield their fruit. So
what a blessing. Look at all those blessings he's telling them that it's going to happen to them.
So this is the thing. So someone might misconstrue this, though, as saying, when God says if, he's saying, if you obey me, then I'll reward you. And so then it becomes a salvation by works thing. It's easy to go that way, but that's why I want to discuss this, because it's so important to understand the difference.
Yeah, but when you understand God's character, I mean, yes, you can't, you have to see the whole big picture. It's not just this little one verse here, that he's going to bless me, but you can't keep the commandments. This is the thing that they can't do it without his help.
Yeah. The way I see it is, that's what I jotted for myself here, is because in the like almost last lines on Thursday, it says that if you obey, these blessings can result because obedience opens the way for me, meaning God, to be able to bring the blessings upon you, right?
Yes.
And how I understand it is like all of the athletes, they have their coaches, right? But and the coach sees the potential in all of them, right? You can be even better athlete. Well, but you need to do this and this and this and this. Well, there are steps to go before you reach your potential. And the athlete could say, well, I don't want to be obedient to you. I know for myself. And then the coach can say, well, okay, go and try, right? But coach sees something that you don't see. And so I guess you could say that God is like our heavenly coach, right? He's looking down on us and he says, my kids, there's so much more potential in you. Let me help you. Yes. No, we can do it on our own. And God's like, okay, fine. Yes. But if you are obedient, that means, okay, you're saying to your coach, okay, teach me, right?
Right.
And then through that teaching, you're like, oh, I don't do these things I used to do before. And he's like, yeah, because that's what you can do. If you give me the leeway in your life. So maybe just one illustration, right?
Yeah. I think it's important to understand the terms of our relationship with God. And maybe that's where a lot of people make the mistake, is our relationship with God isn't an equal thing like I have a relationship with you or you. My relationship with God is different because he is my creator. Yeah. He is an authority. And so the relationship with God involves submission to authority. Whereas my relationship with you, that's not really so much of a factor. we're good friends and we can be friends, and so we have different terms than the terms that we have with the God. And so I think a lot of people take the terms that they have in their earthly relationships and they try applying that to their relationship with God, and maybe that's where they make the mistake. I liked your example of coaching, and it reminded me of the movie Coach Carter with Samuel L. Jackson. I highly recommend that, because that really explains exactly what we're talking about. That lesson, just to teach those kids through trial and practice and routine. And a lot of them didn't want to do it. A lot of them rebelled, and some of them came back. But he cared for them, and he loved and respected them, and he showed them a way of life that they could have that's better than what the world had to offer them. Powerful movie. I highly recommend it. So yeah, this I think, if we go back to, we'll close here with, we'll go back to this concept of the relationship, because I think that's how it really explains it, is we need to understand that this covenant agreement with God is a relationship, and we need to understand properly the terms of that relationship, that he is our authority, and that we do need to submit to him. And we do, so he knows best for us. We can have confidence to say that, okay, God knows best. He knows what the best thing to eat is. He knows what the best thing to do is. He knows the best process of, our daily life.
And I think we do misservice or disservice, what's the better word, to God when we say God is not going to love you if you don't obey. Yeah. That's totally wrong, because even in the Old Testament, when Israel is unfaithful, God says, I'm going to cry because of you. Right? He loves you. It's like your child, but still being disobedient. So, we sometimes tell our children, if you don't do that, God is not going to love you. No, that's false. No. That's teaching wrong theology. God does love you, and he's going to cry.
There's a poem called Hound of Heaven. Oh my, what a beautiful poem. It's the way God keeps pursuing us all the time. He's always there wooing us and calling us to him and just wanting us to be in relationship with him and just to see how good he is. And somebody said, people will realize they're tripping over the goodness of God. Everywhere you look, God is so good, and he's just wanting us to just come and accept him. And just say, yes, Lord.
I look at God as kind of like the conductor of the orchestra of life. And when you have, 7 billion people all wanting to do it their own way, well, the music isn't very good. But if you have every one of us where we are listening to God, that means then that the way I live my life doesn't hurt you or you or you or myself, and it doesn't hurt God's conducting either. And that way, that then there can be harmony throughout the whole earth. But if we're all wanting our own way, wanting to make it our own law, then I'm not going to see things in your life that I'm stepping on and destroying. So it is actually the only way that eternal life can exist, is if we are listening to the Creator who wants only good for his creation. For all of
being on the same page.
Beautiful. I love the way you expressed that.
I think it was Amos 3:3, I think it was in our lesson. We didn't read that one, but it just says how can two people walk together and yet be disagreed. And I think that really sums it up, is you can't have a successful relationship and be at odds. A lot of times in our earthly conflicts, we say, well, we'll just agree to disagree. But what happens to the relationship when you do that? You don't have the same relationship anymore. The terms of the relationship change. And so we need to be in harmony with God. And that's what he just wants us walking in his way, and we need to be in harmony with him. We can't just choose our own way and yet still expect to have a successful relationship with him.
And his law is not burdensome. I mean, people think, to obey the law. Well, it's simple if you just understand his character. It's a growing thing.
And you keep your eyes on him.
That's right, because he's the one that will do it for you.
Yeah. Amen. Well, we should wrap up here and close. That's a powerful thing, and I hope we bless some people today watching to help them understand a little bit more that obedience isn't about legalism. It's not about earning your salvation. It's just respecting and honoring the terms of the relationship with our Creator. All right, let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again for this Sabbath and for your lessons from your word. and for everything that you've instructed through us and for preserving that for us. And we just pray that we can all be better people for it, and that we can be a brighter light to those around us and be examples for you to the people that we interact with every day. And just pray for a blessing on anybody watching this as well, that they're brought closer to you by it. And we just ask for all this in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.
And we'll see you all next week.